Story 1. Technically none. Even in my native language, I often make amateur mistakes, using adjectives in place of adverbs and confusing I and me. I am so ashamed. Story 2. I'm a mechanic. Talk to me. Why waste time saying many words when a few do the trick? Story 3. I expected people who spoke 7 languages or so in these comments. I was disappointed, laughing out loud. Story 4. Not to toot my own horn, but after years as a bouncer, I can speak like a drunk 20-something-year-old college student. Story 5. I'm Duolingo proficient in French and Russian, but let's be real. Story 6. According to my teachers, none. Otherwise, English and Dutch. Story 7. English is my first language. Some days I cannot speak English well. Story 8. Spanish is my native language, and my English is good enough to do my work. Story 9. I do pretty well with English, better than most. Story 10. I speak English and German. I also know a few words of Polish, but not enough to speak it. Story 11. Speaking perfectly and being fluent are very different, in my opinion. I speak Portuguese, English, a little Spanish, and I am just starting with French. Story 12. I speak French and English. I can read Spanish fluently, but I cannot remember the conjugation, so I am not fluent in speaking it. Story 13. English, Arabic, Urdu, Hindi, Italian, Russian, Thai, Japanese. Story 14. Afrikaans and English perfectly. German and Zulu to some extent. Sarcasm beyond compare. Story 15. I speak English and used to be fluent in classical Latin, but I have forgotten how to speak it. Story 16. I can make myself understood in English and Portuguese. Story 17. I speak Danish and English. I can understand Norwegian with no problem, but I cannot speak it. Story 18. I speak Swiss German, German, and English. I had to learn French as well, but I have forgotten most of it and it is far from perfect. When it comes to reading, I can read old styles of German handwriting such as Suetterlin and Current, which were used in the past. It is usually more difficult to decipher handwriting in old letters. Story 19. Tagalog Ilocano, a dialect in the Philippines, and English with a strong Tagalog accent because why not? Story 20. I may be able to speak 2 languages, but I do not speak either of them perfectly. Story 21. I speak Albanian, my native language, and English. I am also learning German and French. Story 22. I am not extremely fluent in English, but I can speak it. I can also speak Hindi, though not perfectly. Story 23. Start with the idea that people do not speak their own language perfectly. Many grammar rules are broken by everyday speech. Story 24. Not perfect, but Hindi, Nepali, English, Urdu mightily. Story 25. I do not speak them perfectly, but I speak both Portuguese and English. I understand Spanish and can speak it a little, but my writing is not great. Story 26. Honestly, none. I have many learning disabilities, so it is difficult for me to fully learn a language, but I am most confident in Greek. Story 27. No one speaks any language perfectly, as languages have a range of dialects, accents, and slang. Story 28. German is my native language. I still make the same mistakes everyone makes. For example, Shin ergeben instead of Shin machen and der dative ist dem genitive sein Tod. Story 29. Nobody speaks any language perfectly, not even people who speak English, laughing out loud. I cannot speak Spanish, even though it is mixed with a lot of slang where I live in Texas. I can get by speaking Cajun French because I am Native American and Cajun, laughing out loud. I can speak both languages well enough to get my point across and communicate with those people if needed. I also know some sign language, but only a few signs. One of them is the middle finger, laughing out loud. Story 30. I speak Croatian and English and am currently working on Italian. I also know a bit of Czech and German. Story 31. I can fluently communicate in Spanish, my native language, and in English. Perfectly? No. Depending on what constitutes speaking a language perfectly, I do not think anyone does. Story 32. Speak Swedish, Finnish, and English. Can also communicate in Danish, Norwegian, and Spanish. Story 33. My English is not very weak. I am still working on my British and Australian accents. Story 34. I am a native English speaker and am fairly proficient in Mandarin and Spanish. I can speak enough French, Russian, and Cantonese to do basic things, such as ordering in restaurants or asking for directions. According to a student earlier today, I said fine drill instead of fire drill. So if she is correct, I do not speak any language perfectly. Story 35. Ever since I started learning Greek, all the languages I know, from fluent to enough to order coffee, get mixed when I speak. But I can write almost perfectly, about 90% in Russian, English, French, and Turkish. Story 36. I want to speak Bulgarian, my native language, but I cannot. Story 37. I speak English, German, Hungarian, and Slovak. I understand Czech well because of Slovak. I have basic Spanish but never learned it properly. I used to speak Latin fluently because it was a requirement at school, but I have forgotten most of it because I did not have many opportunities to use it. Story 38. Well, Chat Generative Pre-trained Transformer told me I don't have a native language. I just have multiple second languages. Story 39. I am not even good at my own language, let alone others. I want to start in English. I speak Portuguese. Story 40. I occasionally make mistakes in my native language too. Story 41. English is my native language, but I know a little French and a few words from other languages. Story 42. No, but I speak English and Dutch fluently. My vocabulary is not the greatest overall. I understand German almost completely, but I have not practiced speaking it for the past few years. However, when I start speaking German about politics, it disappears. Story 43. I speak 3 languages fluently. 2 of them, English and Spanish, are essentially native to me, and I feel comfortable with their grammar. Claiming that I speak any of them perfectly would be ambitious. Story 44. Perfect? No, probably not. I am a native English speaker but have lived outside the United Kingdom long enough that my English is somewhat international and slightly mangled, and my accent is hard to place. Other British people often think I am American, which I find upsetting. I am reasonably proficient in French at the Common European Framework of Reference for Languages Level C1, but that is far from perfect. Story 41, Malayalam, Nannai Sansarikkum. English, aye Captain. Hindi, bol sakta hoon. Tamil, konjam theriyam. Avlo nalla pesva illa, ana adjust pannuven. Kannada salpagatu, Bahala fluent alla. Story 46. In my opinion, you can never speak a language perfectly other than your native language because there are some expressions and patterns of speech that only native speakers can fully master. Even if you study a lot and speak with native speakers, you may never reach perfection. I know people who have lived in my country for more than 20 years and still cannot speak like a native. Story 47. I speak English and German. If you do not care about grammar, I am fluent in both. Story 48. I speak Bangla, English, and Hindi, and I can make myself understood in Urdu, Japanese, and Korean. That is what I like to believe. Story 49. I speak Urdu, Punjabi, English, and Spanish. I can have a conversation in Catalan and Norwegian, though I cannot claim to speak them perfectly. Story 50. I don't know about perfect, but my German is pretty good for a native speaker, and I know when to use there, and there, so I guess above average English too. Story 51. While I am a native speaker of Cantonese, many people on both sides of the Taiwan Strait say my Mandarin has a southern accent. People from mainland China often ask if I am from Hong Kong or Guangzhou. I answer Guangzhou. Some people in Taiwan say they can tell I am not from Taiwan by my accent, but that I am from the south. Numerous people in Guangzhou and other cities in Guangdong mistakenly assume I am from Hong Kong, even though I have only been there for 8 days in my life and I was not born there. When I speak English, almost no one can tell where I am from because I have a standard American or Canadian accent. Most people assume I am a native speaker, but I did not learn the alphabet until I was 9 and did not speak English fluently until I was 15. My post history shows a mix of English and Chinese posts. Story 52. Italian, English, and a little bit of Spanish. Now I'm learning ancient Greek and Latin. Of course I can't speak them, though, laughing out loud. Story 53. I speak Urdu and English. I can also understand Punjabi, Kathrani, and Sindhi to some extent. I know some Pashto, specifically the Quetta dialect, and some Arabic. I can also understand Hindi. None of these languages are very strong. My best is probably English, around 7 out of 10. Story 54. Near-perfect American English and South Vietnamese Cantonese are similar to Standard English and Cantonese. According to my dad, perfectly is nonsensical garbage. Story 55. After 21 years in Germany, my German and English are both fairly good. Together, that's still more than one language, but... Story 56. I'm not perfect, but I speak Finnish, my mother tongue, and English well enough to get by. Compound words in Finnish get me every time. They are multiple words combined to form a new word, like wallpaper, which combines wall and paper. It's more a writing issue than a speaking one. Story 57. Sinhala, native and the main language of Sri Lanka. English, Japanese. I speak all three languages at a native level, but my mind lags and glitches, causing me to mix them while speaking. Story 58. I do not speak either my native language or English perfectly. Story 59. I had a perfect score in English class and on my oral language exam. People told me they thought I was American. I could even read scientific papers in English. Nonetheless, I would not call it perfect. Every once in a while I encounter terms, particularly colloquial vocabulary, that I am unfamiliar with. I also use slang words that nobody uses in real life, like thobite. Story 60. Spanish and Basque. Not perfect. English and Catalan. Fluent. Story 61. Not perfect, but I can easily speak English, Russian, Uzbek, Kazakh, and Karakalpak. I have been waiting for this question for so long. Story 62. French. Even as a native speaker, I can definitely say that no one speaks French perfectly. Story 63. English and Pig Latin for whatever reason. I did not practice it or study it. I just saw an episode about it on television, and my brain said, okay, that is cool, let us do that. Story 64. I do not know what is wrong with me. My mother tongue is Malay, but my inner thoughts are in English. The grammar of English and Malay is completely different, so I sound strange to both my fellow Malay speakers and native English speakers. I wish I could be fluent in both. Story 65. I speak Swedish and English. My Japanese is not perfect, but others say it is. Do British English, American English, and Australian English count as different languages? So I know those two. Laughing out loud. Story 66. German, English, and I'm working on Japanese and Russian, mostly Russian though. Story 67. Fluent in English, Arabic, and Spanish. Learning Japanese. Story 68. Native English speaker. Fluent in everyday Mandarin, advanced French, and basic Spanish and German. Story 69. Arabic is my main language, and I am still working on my English. I am fairly good at writing, reading, and listening, but speaking is what I lack. Story 70. Languages. English, Bax, Dronum, and Makoider. Full disclosure. I am the only person who speaks Bax, Dronum, and Makoider. Story 71. 1. Passive-aggressive. 2. Silence, both comfortable and uncomfortable variants. Story 72. What kind of question is this? Laughing out loud. I am not sure there is a single person who can speak any language perfectly. Many people are fluent in more than one language, but how perfect is perfect? I do not even think I could say I speak English perfectly. I definitely cannot, laughing out loud. I was about to mention I can speak Spanish but ruled that out because my Spanish is far from perfect. I am fairly effective in conversation. I work in the landscaping industry and have spent a lot of time working with Latinos. Much of that time I was the crew supervisor and had to direct and supervise Spanish-speaking crew members. Most of them did not understand a lick of basic English, so I ended up speaking Spanish almost exclusively 40 hours a week for a couple of years and really picked it up well. I took Latin in high school and I had 2 years of Spanish in middle school, and that little bit made it possible for me to learn Spanish later in life. I remembered how to conjugate verbs with the right endings and had a basic grasp of grammar with some spotty vocabulary that began to come back. I am very glad I had the life experience to pick up another language, especially one that is incredibly useful in the United States. I eventually intend to travel to Spanish-speaking countries for vacation when I can. I am excited at the idea of being able to travel to another country and speak their language. I have been to several countries, a few European nations, Japan, Mexico, and Montreal. Each of those trips was a struggle to travel, plan, eat, or do anything. Pero no más para mí. No más problemas en otros países como Europa. Voy a ir a los países de mi gente. Los países de cabrones, mamacitas, grandes culos, chaca chaca y donde la pinocha está buscándome. Para un papacito gringo como yo, como Juanito. El papichullo con un corazón fuerte y pinga dura. Ellas pueden regresar a los Estados Unidos conmigo y a mi cama después. Todo serio. No es una broma. Tal vez no creas que tengo palabras, ¿verdad? Pero estoy totalmente serio. Es una vida. ¿Verdad? Aquí nada es falso, hombre. Esas palabras son reales. Y cuando digo que es real, es real. Es verdad. Nunca voy a decir una palabra que no sea verdad. Ni una sola vez. Hasta que los dioses digan puta madre. No soy gringo, jajaja. Pero soy blanco y tengo padre gringo y madre muy, muy gringa. Ay caramba. Lo siento, gringos. Estoy usando drogas ahorita y cuando tengo una oportunidad para hablar en mi lenguaje favorito, yo hago eso. Y perfectamente y exactamente. Claro que sí. Shaking my head, gringo jokes. Real hasta la muerte. Si tú sabes, tú sabes. Fuck Duolingo. If you actually want to learn Spanish, get a job doing something that requires cojones. I hope some of you all picked up on my Spanish entry and I hope it might have given you a chuckle. In which case my job is over. Working hard or hardly working, I do not know what that even means. No hablo en serio. Story 73. I speak like an auctioneer, especially when I forget to take my attention deficit hyperactivity disorder medication. Story 74. English. I'm still working on my German and I'm about halfway to fluency, I'd say. Story 75. I technically speak 3 languages: French, English, and Spanish. However, since I have been living in Spain, I no longer fully speak any of them because my sentences mix the structure of one language with the vocabulary of another. Story 76. None, but my Norwegian and English are pretty good. I do not think most people speak perfectly. Story 77. I hope my English is good enough to be considered fluent. I speak Korean like a 7-year-old. Story 78. I can understand English and Dutch. I can also understand Danish, Afrikaans, French, Spanish, and German quite well, but I am not a confident speaker. Story 79. English. American Sign Language. Bulgarian Sign Language. My Bulgarian is not perfect yet but passable. Story 80. Finnish, Swedish, and English. I will learn German soon if I do not become overwhelmed by stress. Story 81. English, French, and American Sign Language. I have forgotten a bit of Belgian Francophone Sign Language, but I can still hold my own. Story 82. I don't see the text to edit. Please paste the text you want cleaned. Also confirm. 1. Do you want acronyms expanded into full phrases, e.g., NASA, National Aeronautics and Space Administration, or spelled out letter by letter? 2. Keep original languages: English, Hindi, Urdu, Sirjapuri, German, as is, or transliterate non-Latin scripts to Latin. I will then return only the cleaned content suitable for Azure text-to-speech. Story 83. The language of my cat. We see eye to eye on a lot of things. Story 84. None. My mother tongue has 3 versions, and I can only speak the first version. Story 85. English, French, German, Dutch, Italian, Spanish, and enough Russian to get me slapped or to prompt a visit from a representative of the Embassy of Canada. Story 86. My native language is Spanish, and I also speak English. I can understand and speak enough Japanese to handle a simple conversation, but I cannot read or write it. Story 87. I can proudly and confidently say that I have mastered English. I understand French and am somewhat able to maintain a conversation. I am fluent in Arabic because it is my mother tongue. I am currently taking online Spanish classes. Story 88. I'm German, and nobody speaks German perfectly as taught in books. I don't speak any other language perfectly either. Story 89. I speak Ukrainian and I am learning English. I used to read and speak a little Polish and understood it well, but now I only understand a little. I can read and speak Russian, although I wish I could exchange this knowledge for French or German. I study French at school, but I do not understand it yet. My strongest languages are Ukrainian and English. Story 90. Spanish is my first language. I learned French and English as a toddler. Story 91. I speak French and English well, but I speak perfectly in Franglish. Story 92. Fuck me. This is the most probing shit stain inquisition on the whole festering cunt rot that is Reddit. Story 93. I regularly talk to the voices in my head. Story 94. English, mostly. I still get confused over effect and effect. Story 95. Northern Ontario French and broken English. None. Story 96. I am fluent in English and Italian and also speak and understand Spanish. Story 97. No one? Everyone makes mistakes in their own language sometimes, let alone others. Maybe I'm just dumb, though. Story 98. I have a mix of New York English and Australian English accents. Story 99. माझी मातृभाषा मराठी आहे, परंतु इंग्रजी नाही. Tengo un gran problema al hablar en mi lengua materna. Deshalb spreche ich Kurzsprache. Story 100. Fanic F18 and Mazatrol perform well for their intended functions, but perform poorly in other areas, including English. Story 101. I don't see the text to correct. Please paste the text you want me to process. Also confirm. By search and replace all acronyms. Do you want each acronym expanded to its full form, e.g., USA, United States of America? Do you want the corrected output in one combined file containing English, Bangla, Hindi, Sylheti, and French versions, or just a single multilingual paragraph that includes those languages? For the bonus points, guess about your country of residence and origin. Do you want a short guess with explanation? Once you paste the text and confirm, I'll process it and output only the corrected content suitable for Azure Text-to-Speech. Story 102. Not perfectly, but I can make myself understood pretty well in English, Hebrew, Portuguese, Spanish, and French. Story 103. I speak Russian very well, though perhaps not perfectly. I can speak silence perfectly. Story 104. I am fluent in the Pennyroyal and Highland Rim dialect of Kentuckian, a localized variant of American English. There is only about an 8-county area where this dialect is well understood. Story 105. None, I guess. My native language is Russian, but nobody speaks perfect Russian. Written Russian is a whole different level of complexity. Story 106. I will not say perfect, but I speak fluent English and Spanish with passable Catalan and French, though my vocabulary is rather limited. Story 107. English to the point where a teacher asked me if I was from an English-speaking country in middle school. Story 108. What is your definition of perfect? As a native English speaker, I use the language well enough to communicate with most other English speakers, so I would say I speak it proficiently. If you mean perfect as complete or finished, the mercurial nature of language makes it impossible to know everything about it. Language is not an exact science, so it is difficult to pin down. If by perfect you mean flawless, one would have to know every aspect of the language. Therefore, no one can speak any language perfectly. There are many other factors that affect speaking a language: body language, tone of voice, and audience. Story 109. I am fluent in English and French, but I wouldn't say either is perfect. Story 110. I would love to be able to speak Turkish, but unfortunately I speak this pile of incantations better than my own mother tongue. Story 111. 0. I butcher the English language every day, and it is my native tongue. Story 112. Arabic and English are my second languages, but I think I am quite good at them. Story 113. Perfectly? There is probably no one on earth who speaks a language perfectly. Fluently? 5. Story 114. I am not perfect, but I am fluent in French, Spanish, and English. I am much better at writing than at speaking. I often stumble over words because my mouth does not keep up with my brain. I also started learning Russian on Duolingo, but I gave up. Story 115. I am Argentinian. I am learning Spanish, English, and a little Italian. Story 116. I wouldn't consider myself perfect in my native tongue. Story 117. None. I am highly proficient in both Dutch and English. Estoy 118. Tengo acento cuando hablo alemán y necesito practicar el habla en inglés. Acabo de obtener el nivel A1 en francés, así que me estoy centrando en ese idioma. Story 119. Español nativo. Inglés, entre 80 y 85%. Alemán, 10%. Japonés, nivel de aficionado al anime. Story 120. The two responses you will get here are my native language and English or English. A better question would be, which languages do you speak imperfectly? Story 121. I can speak English, German including Swiss German, Arabic, and I am currently learning Spanish. Story 122. German and English well enough to get by but far from perfect. Story 123. I am somewhat fluent in overly specific, useless analogies, but it's still a stretch. Story 124. My speech disorder significantly affects my English, but so far it does not affect my Spanish. Hopefully in a few years it will improve. Story 125. My father always claimed he raised bilingual children. We were fluent in English and profanity. Story 126. Nobody speaks a language perfectly. If they say they do, they are lying. Story 127. Perfect is a strong word. I would say none, actually, because I make rookie mistakes in both my native language and in English. As long as people understand what I want to convey, I do not really care. Story 128. It is pretty annoying that the top comments are poor attempts at the same joke. Why did I think it would not be that way? Story 129. French, English, and Spanish. Keeping up with Vietnamese too. Story 130. Perfectly? It's not even my native language. I don't think one needs to be perfect in a language as long as they can communicate in it well. Story 131. I speak Polish and Russian fluently. I am still learning English and can understand some Japanese. Story 132. 很不可思议。我大半生都住在俄罗斯，15岁时开始与中国做生意，那时就学会了中文。第二次去中国时，我和工作伙伴在街上交谈，3位女孩从我们身边走过，她们用中文说她们和我以及我的朋友有过性关系。我一听便对她们说了句类似谢谢女士们的话，她们害羞地赶紧离开了。Story 133. I am pretty good at English because I grew up speaking and writing it. I would say I speak poor Spanish, although it is not terrible. My problem is I do not really know enough words, but I understand most of the grammar. I sometimes get the subjunctive mixed up. Story 134. I speak Greek and English. I also know German and Italian, but I am less proficient in them. Story 135. I speak Russian so well that I'm going to the state competition. Story 136. None. I have a stutter, but English and Spanish are my two main languages. Story 137. I don't see the text to edit. Please paste the text. Also tell me, 1. Do you want acronyms expanded into full phrases in the same language, translated to English, or removed? 2. Any specific acronym expansions to use? 3. Keep original languages as is. English, French, Dutch, German, little Polish. That's all. Paste the text and I'll process it. Story 138. I speak Telugu, Hindi, and English. I can understand a little Kannada and Tamil. Story 139. I may speak 4 languages, but none of them perfectly. I still make slight mistakes here and there. Story 140. I speak 5 languages, but when it is time to tick a box on a form, I cannot mark any of them as fluent. I speak English better than most native speakers, but I know my limits and cannot claim to be fluent. Story 141. None. I'm not good at English. Don't even get me started on other languages. Story 142. I don't see the text to edit. Please paste the English/Croatian text you want processed. Before you paste, confirm. Expand all acronyms to their full forms in the same language. Remove links and special characters. Fix spelling, punctuation, and meaningless repetition. Preserve English and Croatian content. Keep Croatian diacritics. Output plain text only, with normal sentence and paragraph breaks suitable for Azure text-to-speech. If that's correct, paste the text and I'll process it. Story 143. In English, I coin words as a matter of course. In French, I can get by. In German, I remember to say bit, danke and genau. Story 144. I am a native Swedish speaker. After 30 years in the United Kingdom, my English is good enough to be mistaken for British by other British people occasionally. Many people have told me I talk a lot of nonsense, so I apparently excel at that too. Story 145. Norwegian is my native language, and my English grammar is very good. I struggle with spoken English because of my Norwegian accent, which bothers me, so I say I am not completely fluent in English. Story 146. I am a native speaker of French and German. I speak English fluently because I have spent a lot of time online, and I also speak Toki-Pona. In total, I speak 4 languages fluently. I am taking Spanish and Mandarin classes. I am learning Python, C, C++, and Visual Basic for applications. The only programming language I know well is Visual Basic for applications, and it is not my favorite. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.